This is the Paying It Forward podcast, episode 5.
The one thing I would say to young people, especially because if you don't know what that is, the nice thing is there's lots of companies out there where you can try different things. There may be something that interests you. Find those little peaks of interest.
Hi, and welcome to the Paying It Forward podcast. My name is Steve Richards. Thank you for listening. I believe if you want to attain a C-level position in your career, you need to understand what it takes to achieve that level of leadership. When you have access to successful entrepreneurs and senior executives who want to help you develop the skills and traits to become a great leader, it's like having your own mastermind group to mentor and guide you. In a nutshell, that's our podcast. My guest today is Janice Lee. Janice is currently head of America's region, managing all the United States, Canada, and South American sales and marketing, and promoting a major international airline. Before making the leap into the airline industry, Janice had an extensive marketing career in the automotive industry, blending business and technology acumens to drive digital innovation. She enjoys the digital landscape and its constant evolution, but she also has a passion for people and thoroughly enjoys developing future business leaders. In our interview today, Janice will discuss what she's looking for when hiring people, why chemistry and personality are so important. We'll also discuss leadership, mentoring, hiring, relationships, conflict resolution, communication, and much more. Janice, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Steve.
So you have a fantastic background, automotive industry, now air transportation, particularly the digital space. Can you tell me how you got started in the digital space? What compelled you to get into this area? Can you talk me through that?
So digital was not where I started. I actually started in the sales department and worked my way around the company. I felt very fortunate that the company actually allowed you to do that. There was a digital manager already in the role, and I was actually doing another consumer strategy role. The person that was in digital left the company. I was actually asked to help backfill the role. My immediate direct report manager asked me to help her with it. And while I was doing that, we actually had some pretty meaty projects that were up and running. And I was about maybe 2 or 3 months into the search, I narrowed it down to 3 candidates that I thought were really good. But my corporate manager at the time called me into the office and said, have you ever thought about doing this role? And I says, I could never do the digital role. And she was like, why? He says, no, I'm getting some really great comments from some of the people that you're working with that you're actually a really good fit for this role and you get it. Not just the business side of it, but the technology side. And I got into the job, fell in love with it.
So that's a great story. So you have at least 2 that I heard in there, at least 2 different people who believed in or identified, let's say that.
Yeah.
They identified you in advance, or at least looked at you and said, this is a really good fit.
Right.
So these leaders were sort of positioning you. These leaders seem to find something about you. I'm curious if you could think back to what that leadership quality they exhibited toward you, what they were mentoring you in sort of a roundabout way, but they weren't really mentoring you yet. They were just identifying you.
Right.
Was there anything in particular about those leaders and the qualities of their characters or skill sets that you went, oh yeah, okay, I get it? Or
my leadership back then was very interested in moving the brand forward. And then also, I think one of the things that people saw in me is just the ability to explain both technological perspective and then from a business acumen perspective to say, look, we're going to invest this amount of money. Here's the return. It was the ability to explain both sides of it. Technology was exciting, but once we got them on the path and once they started seeing
right.
some products being rolled out, the better.
What was the most important quality you needed to have as a leader in that point?
For me, I think having a really strong team and bringing the team together. I was really excited about the project and the fact that, my goodness, I got to do this for, one of the major automotive brands. How lucky am I?
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited about being first in the space and creating the future of the space, and for me, bringing the team on board and getting them excited about it was what really got me up at night. Always one team, one dream for me. We all wanted the same
Oh, that's great.
delivery. We all wanted it to be successful. We all wanted to get behind it. So it was really important from the beginning. Everybody felt fully invested, and also felt very much valued as part of the team. Their opinions were taken, considered, and either discussed and moved forward, or maybe tabled for other discussions. But I really think it's important that you have a team that's contributing to the overall delivery and success.
So when you built this team, or you have this team now, knowing that team is highly important, it must have been, I don't know, challenging is not the right word, but I'm really curious, what were you looking for? What do you look for when you're hiring people, whether that be previous or even currently today?
I think it's a lot of chemistry. Some skill sets you can teach. You can't teach
Hmm.
personality a lot of time, right? So people come with their baggage, which you get, but you want to make sure that the team is cohesive, the team is collaborative, and people feel, like they can contribute to the team. So I think there's a lot of chemistry involved. You want to make sure what skill sets people bring to the team, and then maybe offset that by bringing in other skill sets, but then coming together, people realizing what other strengths are and building on that together.
What's the biggest challenges you see with today's employees, and how can somebody stand out?
Interesting that you asked that question, because today, especially, I feel like it's much more a part of the process when you're applying for a job to have a test, or to come up with a project or put a portfolio together. For example, when I was building my new team in my current role, I actually had we were launching a new gateway for the airline that I was working for, and I actually had a couple of the employees that coming in to say, we're launching a new gateway. We just found out, we're going to do an activity in the city. And I had them put together an activation. I wanted them to come in with their breadth of work, their portfolio, and also to see how quickly they could think on their feet to say, if we were
Mm.
going to do an activation in this city, what are some of the options, have one or two. And I was really impressed. I think today a lot of companies are asking for more than just this one-on-one conversation interview,
Mm.
to really get an understanding of how people think, understand how they can work under pressure, and then also to get an idea of their breadth of work as well.
So I'm a team player. I'm quick on my feet. I'm resourceful. I can react under pressure well. I know what the target is. I know who I am. I'm either going to hit the target or grossly miss it. What's the number one thing I need to do the moment I get the assignment?
What you want to start with is what you're comfortable with, where you're coming from. So, for example, someone on my team is excellent in search, but bringing your strengths into the project is where you want to come from, to say, look, my expertise is in this space. This is what I would think that I this is the way I would go, but this is also what I would bring. And these are my experiences, my thoughts, my contributions. So I really learned to respect, her expertise in search, and understanding that space so thoroughly that you end up leaning on each of those members of your team for their different strengths that they bring, and everyone's going to bring something a little different. That's the nice thing about a leader, is you're going to want someone who's stronger in some of the skill sets than you are,
Yeah,
right? That's how you
for
build a
sure.
stronger team. I want someone who knows a little bit more about uh, what I'm uncomfortable with, to bring to the team.
So when you hire that, so that's internal team giving the assignment. Do you do the same type of assignment when you're actually hiring from the outside? Do you put two or three candidates together? Are these candidates paired up just as candidates, or are any candidates paired up with internal people, then do that exercise?
Initially, it's on their own. So
Okay.
they come in on their own with their own creative ideas. I give them just a very, very high level brief of a project
Okay.
that we're working on, because I need to know how they think. And then if they are able to be resourceful enough to get enough information to put in front of me, obviously, the they're not going to have all of the details of what
Sure.
I'm doing internally. I
Sure.
love it when someone comes into a meeting and says, I don't know what data you have. I don't know how you're running your campaigns. I don't know how you're doing this, but if you were doing A, B, C, D, this is how I would act. And that's great because you know that someone's thinking of the whole picture. They're able to think broadly. They're able to think about the landscape and figure out how to be successful in that space. And that's what you want, someone who's going to think about all that.
I like the out of the box. I really like the out of the box idea because what I'm finding and hearing today through various sources is a lot of the younger generation or the generation coming out or just starting their careers, or let's say they're mid to late 20s, they're used to getting an assignment and returning that assignment, but they're not necessarily as resourceful, whether it become researching or they're quick at researching, quick to draft something and send it, but the quality may not be there. The quality may be there. It really depends on the person. It sounds to me like most of the people that are being hired today are those that are self starters, initiating, driving, thinking outside the box. They are creative. They're able to work in a team environment. In order to be that successful in what you just described, it sounds to me like people need to be very communicative. How communicative, how well, how good are younger people today at that, or new hires coming into the workforce in your experience? Have you been able to see people coming in, you go, wow, these guys are great, or these guys are terrible, whoever they may be?
I think as a leader, you're going to deal with a lot of different personalities. I
Mm-hmm.
had members of my team who were not that outspoken. They internalize quite a bit, but you have to understand how they work. So you give them a project and they're going to jump in and they're going to go to it. What I liked to do at the time was bring the entire team together and say, here's the breadth of work, and here's how do we divide this up as a team. How do we make sure that everybody gets bits and pieces of it that they can be successful in? And it was interesting to me. I would see little bits of leadership come from the unlikeliest source. Someone who is very introvert, someone
Mm.
who is very, very much in their space, liked what they had to do, but then they would come out and to the team and say, okay, this is how we should do this. Has
Mm.
anybody thought about that? And it was really great because it was their time to shine.
Oh, that's great.
I think the great thing for us as leaders, and I know maybe, some would disagree with me, is the fact that these young people are growing up with social media.
Yeah, I
And
think
they
it's good.
have these platforms that they can express themselves and they can be creative in. And then when they come into a workplace and they're able to shine by doing what they love and what they've grown up with, they once they feel comfortable in the space and they feel like their leadership is valuing their position, they they tend to bubble up and they
Mm.
surprise you, and it's really
Mm.
amazing to see.
No,
That's
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 great.
that's absolutely what I love about this space.
I like the fact that you collapse your teams together. Teaming is important. I love chemistry. I love personality. I like that you can give a test to a group to see how they form, storm, and norm. Talk to me about conflict resolution in either the assignment or in just day to day observation, because there can be bad conflict and there can be healthy conflict. I'm
Mhm.
curious if you, as a leader, get a chance to see that, and then if you get to see that it's resolved well or not, how can younger workers today, or just workers in general, I guess, today, be better at conflict resolution?
That's a very good question because everybody handles that very
Right.
differently. And when you're dealing with someone who's grown up potentially being told that they can do and become anything, when they're told that what they're delivering isn't the greatest thing, can be a difficult conversation. But I truly believe as a leader, it's your responsibility to make sure they understand what they do extremely well and where they have opportunities to grow.
Mm.
You never want to crush anybody's spirit, no matter
Right.
what. And the fact that they're contributing is amazing. And I love that especially when they're vested. But you're absolutely right. You want to make sure you deliver it in a way that's constructive. For example, at the end of a project, something may not have been done exactly the way we had thought it was going to be, and how can we work that out? Or there may be conflict within the team, but I'm a true believer that once you know about it, you have to get in front of it, you have to address it, you have to just sit down and say, this isn't working, this is what this means, and this is how we need to move forward, but let's work together on how best we can do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Do you observe people are just not getting it, or they get it but they just don't handle it right? Because the feedback can come in couple different ways, right? Do you find that individuals are good at resolving conflict, or do you ever have to sort of step in more than you prefer?
A combination of both,
Okay.
especially when you're dealing with immaturity, right, in the
Right.
workplace. When you're dealing with some really young people, and it's just they get very self-involved. But for the most part, it's actually resolved really well. I always lead my conversations with saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Yep, I agree.
So by me outlining, hey, this isn't working. I'm not sure what's going on between, the team personally, but this dynamic isn't working. And, we're at work, or we used to be at work much longer than we were at home. So, I'm always interested in making sure it's the best experience it can be. Kind of a, I know that's not always realistic, but I do like to try to make the work environment as pleasant as possible. But
Yeah.
understanding, of course, everybody's personalities are different, and I'm a strong believer that that's great. We don't all have to be best friends. Leave that at the door. When you walk in the door, we've got a job to do. We're all
Yeah.
here to make sure that the company, what we're doing for the company, is the best that we can do. And if we can't get past that, then we have to have some serious conversations, and maybe this isn't the right place for you.
So I'll be one of these people for a second. So you need
Hmm.
to have a conversation with me, and there's something about me. There's something about me that I'm not doing right. I'm not meeting some expectation. Do you think at times it's personality related? Do you think sometimes it's assignment to skill set related? Or is it just I'm clueless? Like sometimes I can just be difficult to work with. I can be temperamental. I
Right.
can also be perfectly fine, understand the assignment, and I miss the mark. And I miss it too many times, which means I'm not getting something in the translation of communication. When you have those conversations, there's a commonality I would think across the board. It's probably unique per person, but I think if you step back, I'd be curious if you're seeing the same repeating pattern from an individual or a repeating pattern amongst many individuals.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It has been very different, to the point where you said skill set, right? They're just not in the role that they can be successful at. So
Okay.
maybe we have to move them into another place. And then in other times it is personality and it is temperament. And you know what? We don't get to choose the environment we always, get to work in. Some people it's necessity, but at least we can try to be professional and contribute to the team and leave your differences and your temperament, aside. We have a job to do. Like I said, when we're at the office, we have a job to do. Let's be professional. But in some, there have been some young, I'll say, people that I've worked with where it was personality, and unfortunately they just couldn't get past it, and so we've
Mm.
had to, get to the point where we're going to part ways.
So you have an opportunity. You're sitting over an iced tea on the patio. You're with a group of people, one, two, 10, and you say, "Look, here's the deal. If you guys just do this, you'll be successful. If you avoid this or watch out for this, you'll be successful. But by all means, do these X 3, 5, 7, whatever it is, so whatever number comes to mind. I'd be curious. What are the things that new hires or people or staff, what can they do today? What are the 3 or 5 things you would advise people? Just do this.
You've got to be fully present. You've got to come in and want to be a part of what's going on. What is it that's getting you excited about being a part of this team and what you're going to deliver? Hopefully your leadership is helping to get you excited about it. The other thing is bring your expertise and your skill set.
Mm.
At the end of the day, you may not like this person, but there is something about that person's work that you value and that will help you be successful. And as a collective, bring the team together and to be successful. So I say definitely be fully present when you're there, when you're working with your team. Be invested in the project to make sure that we're going to move the project forward. Put your differences aside and look for, what the value is that that person brings to the team, and figure out how best to work with them to get through to the success of the project.
Okay, so you've talked about leadership qualities that a leader should have, in particular those that you have. You've given us how to avoid conflict, taking initiative, being assertive. You've given us specific things that people can work on, which I love that answer. Is there one piece of advice you've received, and is it or would it be the same advice you would give others today?
Even when I read it or I hear someone else say it in a podcast or at a conference or something, and I go back to it every time because you have to love what you do.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of the core of it. You have to be invested in what you're doing. Like I said, we spend more time doing this than we get to spend with our families. But you have to be invested in it. And if you're going to get past your temperament and your personality or anything like that, if you're at least invested in what it is that you're doing, you can get past all that. Have an interest, start growing it, let it peak. The one thing I would say to young people, especially because if you don't know what that is, the nice thing is there's lots of companies out there where you can try different things. There may
Mm-hmm.
be something that
Mm-hmm.
interests you, something as simple as reading, but find those little peaks of interest, spend a little time investing in that and see where that leads you.
Yeah, find a passion, hang on to it, and really invest yourself in it, and
Yeah.
follow what makes you happy, what makes you
Yeah.
do. I think you were right. I think earlier in this conversation when you were mentioning about social media, in the digital landscape, I think it's a fabulous skill set to have. Obviously, when you're younger coming out, because you've got all these great experiences that you grew up with. You don't know any different.
The one thing I will say, Steve, is as a leader, especially today, don't discount that different approach to the way young people do things because I've really found that there's these little sparks of joy and these little sparks of intellect that come through, and they may go about it differently, right?
Hmm.
They've grown up differently, that their media around them is much more intense than it's ever been. But I do think the value that they bring, it can really open up some ideas that you would never have thought of for a brand.
You've had great experiences in the digital space. Folks that tend to play well in that space from a worker standpoint tend to be on the younger side because they're in it all the time. It's second rote to them. They don't think twice.
Yeah, just
And then they've
comfort.
gotten yeah, exactly. And they've gotten degrees in the digital space where that may not have existed, 15 years ago. Your experience has been very positive with staff and people working in that whole space. So that's great to hear. I think they're working on great stuff and they just need to keep doing more of it.
Right. There's this one, I'll share this with you because I think this is fabulous. I went to a conference a while back where they were talking about working with millennial workers.
Mm.
And it was interesting because there was this team, this staff, every morning they come into the office about 8 o'clock, sit around, drink coffee, chit chat around the water cooler, and then they sit down and get to work at 9 o'clock.
Mm.
The millennials in the group, a couple of them decided not to come into the office until 9 o'clock.
Mm.
And so it was interesting because the superior, the managers in the group said, "Hey, start time is 8 o'clock. Why aren't you in here at 8 o'clock?" And the millennials in the group says, "I didn't need to be in here at 8 o'clock because all you guys do is sit around and talk. I come in at 9 o'clock and I get to work." And it's not, and you have to think that through. Like, I mean, someone like me or you might have been taken aback and it might have been offensive, but they didn't have anything they felt they could contribute to
Mm.
the banter back
Mm.
and forth. They don't need that connectedness. They wanted to come in and get to work. Another story that I'll share with you
Mm.
experience wise is there was a team that had obviously millennials in the group. A couple of the millennials, first thing they do when they come in the morning is they're on their phones and they're doing their
Right.
social media and going back and forth. And again, manager walks up and says, "You're at the office now. I don't want you on your social media." And they put their phone down, sat down, went to work. Same thing next day, come in, first thing they're on is their social media. Managers finally sits down with them individually and says, "I don't understand. Why are you on your social media? I told you when you come and you do the work." Says, "Did you know that these 5 competitor brands are actually out here doing this? And I'm looking at that first thing in the morning
Oh,
before I
wow.
sit down and come and do
Wow.
my work.
That's awesome.
So if they're invested in your brand, they're looking to see what your competitive brands are doing and that are appealing to them as an audience oftentimes. And even if they're not, because they're in the space, they might be following your brand or whatever. They'll get, messages popping up in their feed that they start realizing this is relevant to what I'm doing.
Hmm.
But again, we wouldn't have thought that, right?
Right.
Coming up, it's a waste of time. They're not paying attention to what they're doing. But in fact, it actually, some of it's social. They're letting their friends know what's going on, but they're also getting some outside information on what's going on in my space and
Hmm.
how is that relevant to me. And it was really enlightening.
Yeah, they're just using a technique and a tool that some of us non-millennials may not
Right.
even think to use.
Right.
That's fascinating. That's great. What have I not asked you that you would really like to make sure you get across to our listeners?
I think the one thing I really want to share is that this last year with the pandemic and the virus has really changed what the future of the workplace is going to be like, right? I mean, for us in the digital space, it's been exciting to see how e-commerce has just leapfrogged
Oh,
in the
yeah.
last year, and generations who were a bit reluctant to maybe try things online were forced to move in that direction. And I think as a leader, it's going to be very interesting how you decide to have your teams work together. I think a lot of companies are really going to be grappling with that. But I think young people can thrive in that environment because you do have a lot of introverts that are very focused on what they're doing, and sometimes the office can be distracting. With this generation, leaders have to understand they're very comfortable online. So don't think they're not contributing. They respond very quickly. They're very engaged in what's going on with their workplace oftentimes. I think it's going to be exciting to see how well they grow and they excel.
So, as a business leader, people have mentored you, or at least been open to suggestions and offering you advice. You sit in the middle of this, let's call it two-way highway. One direction, you've got people mentoring you, and another direction, you're mentoring other people. Have you had any really good mentors? How have you been mentored? How instrumental were these people in your career? And then maybe turn that to you mentoring others.
Interesting you asked that question. I read years and years ago when I was just starting my career, when I considered it a career at the time, about mentors. And I remember me reading Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis
Mm-hmm.
saying, you don't need mentors. You're your own best mentor.
Mm-hmm.
You bring your confidence, bring your knowledge, and just strive. You have leaders you look up to. You have leaders that you go to for advice. But she was a strong believer back then that you don't need a mentor. And so I've had really great relationships with some of my leaders, and I was very very lucky. One in particular, I think, is absolutely brilliant, and I have a great relationship with him still. I keep in touch with him, and whenever I need advice, I do really respect his advice because he's just there's no BS. He tells me exactly what he thinks, and he's always been that way, and I absolutely appreciate that. And then the other way, I love it. I absolutely love it when people ask questions, and I love helping young people out. I love their self-confidence and their entrepreneurial spirit.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so interested in trying something new, and they're brave. I think for my generation, we were very focused on stability. For the most part, we just kind of went with the status quo with the corporate job. I think the world is their oyster, and I love that so many of them see it that way.
Yeah.
And they're unafraid, and I think they should definitely continue to move in that direction.
How important to you is relationship building in the workplace?
Oh, I think that's key, but I think it's so important to mix the traditional generations like us with the young
Yeah,
generation, and
agreed.
really learn to understand each other. I know it's so interesting some of the questions that are asked, but you have to understand, like, if the person decided to come in at 8 o'clock and felt like they felt like contributing to the conversation, they may not have kids. That's the thing, is someone who comes in at 8 o'clock and has kids and is talking about their kids and their frustration around kids. Yes, you get to know Steve better, but I don't really have anything to contribute to the conversation.
Right.
How are we as our generation engaging them and pulling them in? And I really love hearing about some of the stuff that they do or what interests them.
I like the comment of we should do the older generation to do a better job of understanding and developing or incorporating the younger generation. Do you hear or see from colleagues that that's easy or hard?
It depends on how open-minded they are to it. The fact that you have a colleague who asks the question means that they're open to finding out about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of how the world changes so much faster than it used to,
Yeah.
they're kind of forced down this path. I have to say, being in automotive initially was not one of the most innovative industries to be in. I mean, yes, we were moving people, but technology didn't move as fast.
Yeah.
I think for leaders like us, don't feel like you're forced down this road. Be open to it, because like I said, you're going to have these epiphanies of things that you didn't think of before that are going to be amazing for your brand. It's nice, like I said, when you come to the office, be interested, listen to those stories,
Oh, yeah.
both young and old, and especially young, because there's a lot of things that happen that you didn't know about. And just by knowing it will open up your mind and help you get ready for what's coming, hopefully. So, and what you don't know. What I love is the evolution of our landscape, and it should continue to evolve. And there's a really great saying, and was it Thomas Edison? Vision without execution is hallucination.
Yes.
I love that saying.
Yep.
Because everybody has a vision. If you can't execute on it, it doesn't matter. It's hallucination.
Well, this has been fabulous. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Looking ahead in your world, what's got you excited down the road?
I love how technology is making us more aware of our surrounding and being more sustainable. I was really excited when I would go to digital conferences and they would talk about how the new technology is just going to help make the world a better place. It's not just about waste. It's not just about consumption. It's about really helping to make the world a better place. We've used a lot of this world, and I think a little bit of this pandemic is a little kick in the butt to say, hey, let's slow down and take a look at what we've been doing and how we can make some changes.
There's definitely some resetting going on for sure. Janice, if our listeners wanted to reach out to you, would the best way to reach out be on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn.
Well, thank you, Janice. I appreciate it very much. It's nice to know that there are people in that space who not only love it, but embrace it, love the constant change in there, and work very closely with not only the older generation, the boomers, but also the millennials. And you've got great experience, great things to say. It's just wonderful to see you embracing what the leaders before you saw in you and how you embraced that, and you've taken off and done such a marvelous job. So I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. This was great. So good to connect with you again.
She is Janice Lee, head of America's region for a major international airline company. And you had the opportunity to listen to Janice discuss the digital marketing space, specifically about hiring, why chemistry, personality, and cohesion and collaboration are important. She also discussed what you can do to stand out. She talked about leadership, responsibility, accountability, taking ownership, and how to deal with conflict and conflict resolution. This information and more is in the show notes section of this episode on our website. Simply go to www.lessonsfromthecsuite.com/episode 5. You can follow our podcast for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Libsyn, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast player. If you happen to think this is a 5-star worthy podcast and you leave a written review, I'll be sure to mention your name in an upcoming episode as a small way to say thank you. If you're not yet following this podcast, please go to www.lessonsfromthecsuite.com, sign up or subscribe, it's free, and you'll receive a PDF on various ways you can pay it forward every day. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions for the podcast, any guest suggestions, or any feedback in general, please send us an email at feedback@lessonsfromthecsuite.com or go to our website and submit a message directly. Thank you for listening. Until next time.